Well, our top story, the long-awaited Afghanistan Peace Summit has begun in Moscow with delegations from Afghan government and the Taliban in attendance. The summit is the latest attempt to end the conflict in Afghanistan and to map a future for the country after the withdrawal of the US troops. Notably, this is the first time that Taliban's political wing based in Doha is participating in the peace talks as well.
Dear colleagues, all the countries face threats from international terrorism, one of the targets of which is Afghanistan. Terrorists, represented by Islamic State, not without support of external sponsors, are taking steps to turn Afghanistan into the foothold of their expansion into Central Asia and our wider region as a whole. It is the aim of all countries and all active structures in the region to help Afghanistan uproot this terrorist threat.
And India, which is participating in the summit at a non-official level, said that it was in support of all efforts at peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan. The summit is being held after much delay. Now, Moscow had proposed to hold the multilateral summit, peace talks in August this year, but the meeting was postponed after the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani rejected the invitation on the grounds that talks with Taliban should be led by Kabul. New Delhi says it is committed to the Afghan peace process. Let's listen in to what the Foreign Ministry had to say.
It was decided by the Government of India that our participation will be at the non-official level. Now, beyond this, I really can't get into the details as to why it was at this level. There are a lot of factors which goes into taking a decision. This time, it was the considered decision of the Government of India that we will participate at a non-official level. In our policy on Afghanistan, which we have articulated and which has been consistent for quite some time now, that we will be supportive of any process in Afghanistan where Afghanistan is a participant, they are party to that process, and they also have a stake in the process, which means that any process which is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-driven.
And joining us to talk a little bit more about the Moscow-led peace talks in Afghanistan is Dan Ashby, who joins us from Moscow. Also joining us is Dilip Sinha, former Indian diplomat and ambassador, joining us from New Delhi. Dan Ashby, if I can come to you first in Moscow, how hopeful is Russia of a positive outcome of engaging with the Taliban, and how does this pitch Russia vis-a-vis the US, which also has initiated separate dialogue processes with the Taliban but hasn't yielded much?
Yes, exactly. I think already this is being seen as a success in Moscow, just because, as you've already said, this is unprecedented in a way. They have managed to get the High Peace Council, which is backed by the Afghan government, here in Moscow, Taliban representatives as well, and then you have the likes of the Foreign Minister of Russia talking about trying to achieve a indivisible territorial integrity to try get a peace and give some hope to the Afghan people. So Russia sees this as a success, to be showing its global influence and getting these two parties to talks, particularly, as you said, when we know that the US has been trying to do the same, or at least there appears to be some talks on the US side. The question is, though, whether this can achieve what they hope it will achieve and go on to have more substantive talks, more negotiating. The Taliban, of course, came out with this statement saying they weren't negotiating, even though they came here seeking peace. And there are some fears that perhaps the Taliban, the Afghan Representative Council, have come here to get talks going, but they will really do the meaningful negotiations with the US side, of course, who have the 14,000 troops in Afghanistan. But even so, I think Moscow sees this first step as a success.
Right. Dan, stay with us. Ambassador Sinha, how do you see this playing out in Afghanistan? As Dan Ashby was saying, that there are conditionalities as well from the Taliban side. They want the US troop withdrawal as well. So this is, of course, in a sense, many would suggest that the US as presence in Afghanistan, of course, has not helped, and Moscow is now playing a bigger role in the last 2 years, particularly since the Taliban's footprint has once again increased.
Yes, with its relative success in Syria, Moscow is now turning its attention towards Afghanistan, and as under President Donald Trump, the US withdraws from various international activities, concentrating on certain aspects of its foreign policy. Moscow sees this as an opportunity to try and see if it can get the various Afghan factions together. Now, unfortunately, we find that in the case of Russia now, there is a commonality of interest between Russia, the Taliban, and Pakistan, with the Taliban backed by Pakistan, in that they all want the Americans out of Afghanistan. So that is what their attempt is, to try and see if they can put pressure on the Afghan government to accept the Taliban in some role in the Afghan government.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure if the Taliban are committed at all to peace efforts. They have certainly not shown any desire to participate in the electoral process in Afghanistan or to join the form the government according to the constitution of Afghanistan. They have not only been boycotting elections, they have actually been attacking elections.
Right.
Now, that does not augur well for the future of Afghanistan or for this process.
Right. And so, Dan Ashby, the question there then would be, what is the kind of mandate that this peace process would have, considering the fact that, as you said that, of course, this has the backing of the Kabul government, but it's not its officials that are talking to the Taliban directly, but the Peace Council and other countries like India also have only non-official representation to this, and the US, of course, only in an observer sort of a representation to this. So how does this really play out?
Yes, exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. This is a first step, as Moscow sees it, and an important first step, which seemingly no one else has been able to achieve. But there are key problems that they have to solve if they want to turn this into a meaningful negotiation, not least, of course, a big United States presence, because, as you say, that seems to be a key point that the Taliban are demanding. They have said for many years that they want to negotiate with the US. And ironically, in some ways, it is Russia's energy to try do something different from the United States that could be the problem there, because the US has been reticent about these Moscow-led talks. As you say, they've sent a representative from their embassy, but no strong official US presence. And you sense that to get a substantive answer to the Afghanistan problem, you are going to need the US at the table in their full capacity, you are going to need India at the table in the full capacity, and of course the Afghanistan government, not just the High Peace Council, but the government itself. So Moscow has shown that it can make some progress, but there are big questions still to answer.
Big questions still to answer, but Ambassador Sinha, what can India's involvement at a non-official level really deliver, and what does it really mean to be represented, on a non-official level? Many people here asking, then if that is the case, if we can talk to the Taliban, then why not talk to homegrown terrorists as well?
Well, in the case of India, I think India has participated in it primarily for old time's sake, because Moscow has taken the initiative and our relations with Russia are strong. Therefore, we didn't want to let Russia down. Therefore, the best course of action was to send a non-official delegation. But I think that our position on Afghanistan needs to be updated a bit, taking into account the fact that Afghanistan now has a constitution, it has an electoral process. And apart from just saying that Afghanistan should have a peace process that is Afghan-led or Afghan-owned, we should also insist that the various factions must start participating in the electoral politics. The road to Kabul has to be through the ballot box of the people of Afghanistan, and not through Moscow or Washington or Islamabad or any other country.
Right, so the road to Afghanistan's peace process has to be through the ballot and not the bullet. Ambassador Sinha and Dan Ashby, both, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening there.